Texas Story is a conversation with Luci Christian as she talks about her experience growing up, well, just about all over Texas.
I grew up all over the state of Texas. My dad was a high school football coach, sometimes junior high, and we moved every year or two. So I hip-hopped around the state a lot.
And football, as we all know, is huge. High school football in Texas.
Huge, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what it was like to be a coach's daughter. You know, I think of the movie Remember the Titans, and the coach that had the little daughter who was all into it. Was that you?
Well, I guess a little bit. When I was young, I definitely have memories of going and hanging out at the football field and hanging out in the locker rooms and the weight rooms. My brother and I did that. And I think because it was such a part of our life, I mean, when I used to be able to rattle off, like we started out in Hico. I was born in Hamilton, Texas, but we lived in Hico. We moved to Tucumcari, New Mexico, and then it was Lyford, Toller, Ropesville, Bells, DeLeon. Somewhere in there was Hico again. Channelview. We moved down to Channelview for a year. Brady, Hamilton again. For high school. I was in high school there. Then my parents moved to Stanford. I went to college, and they continued to move to Breckenridge and, Glen Rose, and then back to Hico, I think, to stay. Mineral Wells was in there somewhere, too. But I, went to college in San Angelo, and I lived there for 4 years, which was the longest I'd ever lived anywhere in college. And then LSU in Baton Rouge, I was there for 3 years, and then I moved to Houston, and I've been there for forever,
So you're actually had what people would, when somebody moves around that much, they're like Army brat, you
yes.
know, but it sounds like you were even moving more than that.
It was bananas. It was pretty bananas. But it was interesting. I've always considered home to be wherever my family is at the time. The thing that's not so great is, we would move into these small markets where the only thing available is rental property. And so our lives were, in a lot of ways, a little non-traditional, I would say. Eventful. U-Haul was a regular fixture in my life growing up. Mm-hmm. And there's a good part about Texas high school sports. It's something that unites communities, and it can be a real moneymaker, especially for small schools. But the downside is that there can be some undue craziness. And definitely I remember in high school, my senior year, the team wasn't having its best year, and we had for sale signs appear in our yard. My dad's truck windows were busted out and stuff like that. So the same kind of weird Friday Night Lights-ish kind of stuff, it's alive and well, all over. It doesn't have to be some big school like Permian Basin, or whatever. That stuff is real.
In little towns, and not to, diminish what they have or what they are, but for a lot of these little towns, that's what they have. That's yes. their thing, is that Friday night high school football game.
Yes.
There's an old adage or some, kind of thing like that where people talk about, if you ever want to rob the bank at a small town, do it on Friday night because
right.
no one's there.
That's exactly right. It's true. It's totally true.
Do you have any specific stories that you could share with us about, because you're moving around a lot, so obviously you're changing schools. Mm-hmm. And then when you'd come back, would you be back in the same class with the people that you originally left?
The time in between where we would come back was so long, usually, that I don't remember being oh, now we're back with everybody we used to know. No, I have a lot of different memories about moving around. I very much remember that in Channelview, it was the first time we'd ever lived in a brand new house. It was new construction on a little cul-de-sac down there with all the refineries. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that was when it was Hurricane Alicia came through, and everything flooded. And of course, we were cooking with propane out in the garage, and it was hot and gross. And we floated in inner tubes around our cul-de-sac. And for my brother and I, it was just like, what? We had never been a part of anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting memory for us. My mom and dad talk about getting in the car and driving miles and miles to try to find ice. Which, of course, now I live in Houston and I understand how it is.
Right.
But for us, it seemed like some weird coastal pioneering hell. It was something very weird for us coming from central Texas where there's nothing.
Right.
But the weird thing is, too, is I also remember I had cousins that we were all pretty close in age, and we grew up in our younger years spending a lot of time with them. And because we were country kids, I mean, we would, after church, you would go to Yaya's house, and she would be in there making, a brisket, and there would be brisket and beans and potatoes every Sunday with iced tea, of course. And after we ate, we were gone. They just told us to get out. The adults told the children to not come in. And we just went out, and if we were out in the country, we would roam the pastures. We would find old, broken down, rusted out, like dune buggies and trucks and stuff, and just play in them and build clubhouses and do all that stuff just out, far away from any supervision, which is so funny for us today. And if we were in town, they would send us out into these, they had a really big lot and a crazy broke down, dangerous old rickety, used to be a garage, kind of a broke down house. And we just went in there and dug around and explored, and my cousin pulled the legs off Daddy Long Legs. But I mean, it was just such a different kind of life. Or we would walk down, a couple of blocks down was the creek, and we would just go down there and explore. And that's something I don't know that my kids are ever going to have the freedom to be able to do. We try as best we can, but there was a lot of just go and do, go and be.
Well, every generation talks about, back in my day or, that kind of thing. And things were a lot different, a lot simpler. And, I know my parents certainly said that. And now it's funny that we're saying that about our families, But because I was the same way. I can remember while you were telling that story, I can remember we used to go visit this family up in Evergreen, Texas, which is just kind of between Livingston and Willis, up north of Conroe. And they had about 100 acres and big piney woods, and a little catfish pond and an old barn that was huge. We used to climb in and stuff. But my parents were the same. They lived in a log cabin, real log cabin. But we'd go up and visit them, and my parents would go, just scoot, go out in the woods, go do something. Here, take an axe for protection.
Yeah.
And so it's just definitely a different time, but
it was. I can even remember, and I was considered kind of I never wanted to be, I don't know, like, my uncle and them had a dairy, but I never drank white milk. And so I was always considered to be kind of, I guess, the prissiest of the cousins, or the one most likely to move to the city, I guess. But out at their house, they would have the calves out front that they would go feed. The kids would go feed them every morning. And they would have the milk barn. I swept the alley, which is disgusting. It's push and poop. It's gross. But we would go out there, and every now and then the barn would be full of cottonseed. Mounds and mounds of cottonseed. And we would get our butts beat if we jumped and played in the cottonseed. But it was so tempting, and you couldn't not do it, because it was this huge white mountain of cottonseed, and they would have all of their hay piled up all around us. You could crawl up on the hay and then jump off into this huge mound of cottonseed. And then we'd do that for a little bit and then try to push it all back up and not be caught. But of course we were always caught, and we were always, we received spankings, like hardcore spankings, but we always did it.
But it was worth it.
And now I look back and I go, all of that was riddled with snakes and God knows what.
Right.
Nobody was over us or supervising us.
Of course, when you got the spanking, all that made you want to do probably is go sit back in the cotton and soothe yourself, Well, Luci, I got to tell you, this has been a fun time to talk with you. I really appreciate it. And I hope we get a chance to visit soon again.
Yes. Thank you.
This Texas Story was brought to you by the doctors of Texas State Optical, who are proud to celebrate 80 years of Texas history.